Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to Sunday Forum. We have a wonderful guest here today. This is somebody I happen to be deeply familiar with because when I was teaching Introduction to Human Services, I'm gonna cry because she was sitting there in the class and she was like ready to go. She really was. And she did some awesome research. This is Erin Turpin, graduate of St. John Fisher University. And our guest today, she has had, as I expressed in my uh, post to eConnect, she had a distinguished career, I would say, at St. John Fisher, and she has been incredibly active in her professional career. And I follow her on LinkedIn, so I know everything she's been up to, and I described it a little in the eConnect post. And I was just so excited to see that uh, the work she did on nonprofit organizations during her undergrad years, she carried into her professional career. And her very first position, in that transition from college to professional life, she was an AmeriCorps volunteer at a church in the Beechwood neighborhood where she helped St. John's and St. Mark's grow their capacity to serve the community, with their community food bank and other kinds of food programs. And, we're a church that's also trying to do good in our community. So I'm going to let her range all over all the things that she does in the community because everything she does is really important. And I'm not going to go much longer because I want to hear everything Erin has to say. So
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pat. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am so grateful to be here today and to Pat, my professor, the first semester I ever had. And then every semester after that at St. John Fisher, I had Professor Tweet. And I'm so grateful. I am excited to be here today to talk about my work connecting with the land and building community. I love connecting people to nature and helping people meet each other in nature and build reciprocal relationships to the land around them. And so I'll just talk a little bit about how that has looked for me, partially with St. Mark's and St. John's Episcopal Church, and then with other organizations in Rochester as well. I'll start with a land acknowledgement today. So I want to acknowledge, with respect to the Seneca Nation, known as the Great Hill People and the keepers of the Western Door of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I take this opportunity to thank the people on whose ancestral lands we currently reside in Rochester, New York. If you want to learn more about the land that we live, work, and play on, you can go to that website right at the bottom of this screen here, native-land.ca, and it'll tell you more about the land in which we reside. In Pat's invitation to me, she shared this mission statement that I really resonated with and just kind of wanted to start out with that today, growing a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. And I feel like in my role on this earth, I was telling my girlfriend the other day, I feel like my purpose on this earth is to connect with people outdoors, especially around food, growing food, serving food, talking about food, building relationships around the natural world. And so when Pat shared this mission statement for the MacArthur Foundation, I was like, yeah, this feels like me. At the top right, that's a photo of me as a community tree ambassador planting a magnolia tree at Cobbs Hill Park with a 9-year-old who taught me so much about trees that day. It was so nice to have the opportunity to share that time with him and plant a tree. And then in the center, I'm spreading some compost at a community garden on North Union Street near the public market. And then at the bottom, I'm doing a hive inspection on a honeybee hive. I know Pat did a little bit of an introduction, but I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. My name is Erin. I often go by E in the community. Most people call me E. I use she, her, and aya pronouns. I was born in New York City, but my parents were in the military, so I moved around a lot. And I moved here to Rochester in 2017, and this has become my home. I really love it here. I am an urban gardener, a beekeeper, an artist, an activist, and an environmentalist. And professionally, I studied at St. John Fisher. I graduated in 2020, which was a phenomenal year to graduate and start my role in this world. I know. I studied sustainability and sociology, and for me, it was so wonderful to have two vastly different disciplines that I found ways to weave and interconnect and really focused on how we as people and as society can work with each other to impact the world around us, especially the land. As Pat mentioned, I previously worked at St. Mark's and St. John's Episcopal Church. I served as an AmeriCorps Vista, so I did a year of service to the church. I mostly focused on capacity building for their mission programs, which I'll get a little bit more into shortly. I was a community tree ambassador with the city of Rochester. I've been a nature-based educator with an organization called Rochester Ecology Partners, and currently I manage sustainability programs and events at RIT. At the top there, I have photos of me at St. John Fisher, which I hold so closely to my heart. The top right photo is a really full circle moment for me. In that photo, am actually in the building I currently work in at RIT now. That's a photo from when I was an undergrad student, talking about work I did creating an environmental peer education program rather, and I was presenting it at RIT. And now, full circle, so fortunate to work in that building. So getting a little bit more into my work at the Episcopal Church. So after I graduated, applied for this program called Rochester Youth Year, which is an AmeriCorps program funded by AmeriCorps, the federal agency. And there is a cohort of students each year that are placed at different nonprofits, faith-based institutions, or educational institutions in Rochester that host capacity building vistas, is what they're called. And so I was placed at St. Mark's and St. John's Episcopal Church. And St. Mark's and St. John's considers themselves a mission-driven spiritual home in the Beechwood community that seeks to address food insecurity, community health, and underlying causes of poverty, build strong partnerships with folks in the neighborhood, out of the neighborhood, around the county and city, and provide a spiritual healing and inspiration through worship. They really focus on building healthy, beautiful, and green spaces in their neighborhood. And they do this, actually, I'm going to skip this slide really quick and come back to it. They do this through a number of what they consider mission programs. And I will say, I've done these slides many times over the years, and what I have on this screen here are programs that were active in 2021, I believe, or 2022. There may be some changes and iterations these days, but I certainly encourage you to connect with them if you have any questions about any of the programs. I'm happy to answer questions too, but I haven't been involved in a few years. The Eden Gardens are really where my joy for urban agriculture started. So Eden stands for Every Day Eating Naturally. They really focused on helping people in the neighborhood gain access to fresh, healthy, and locally grown food. So there's 7 urban gardens in that neighborhood, just run through St. Mark's and St. John's. There's a number of other organizations in the neighborhood that are doing very similar work and have gardens as well. But SMSJ has 7 of them. They're completely volunteer managed. Each has what they call a garden captain that kind of manages volunteers, makes a plan for the garden, and makes it all possible with the help of volunteers, of course. Everything that's harvested is weighed and washed and then distributed in the community through a couple of these other mission programs, including Farm Stand, which is what it sounds like. It's a side of the road little stand during the summer months, right before service on Sundays. Oh, I have Saturday here. It's on the weekends. And they sell produce at a reduced cost in the neighborhood. And then Food Shelf is a food bank. They're a FoodLink partner agency, so FoodLink brings food there. They distribute food at Food Shelf. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, I had the absolute honor to contribute to the development of a food delivery system. It was an emergency food delivery system in which people in the neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods could request an emergency food delivery. And our team worked together with some volunteers and especially folks from the congregation to figure out what the system would be like for folks to request a delivery in order to develop the routes to make the deliveries possible, to package the food that would go out, that kind of thing. So we really focused more on getting the food packaged in the building and then getting it out of the building so that folks didn't have to leave their homes and come into the space for food shelf. That is not a continuing program. That was really in response to the pandemic. The church also has something called the SOUP program, or they work with the City of Rochester on the SOUP program. SOUP stands for Summer of Opportunity Program. It is run by the City of Rochester, in which they place high school youth at different organizations and they pay them for a summer of work. And so we host at SMSJ teens for 6 weeks, and they're building life skills, they're doing workforce development, they're learning how to grow food, how to work in the garden, how to build compost bins, that kind of thing. This kind of is a little bit of a map of the gardens. See my mouse? Yes. Where my mouse up here is, this is where the church is on the corner of Culver and Rosewood. And all of the gardens are in walking distance from there. And they're all a little different. Each has a different garden captain, a different group of volunteers. Some of them are really involved with the congregation. Others are volunteers from the community, neighbors, that kind of thing. This data is a little bit outdated because I don't have updated numbers as I don't work there anymore. But in 2021, they had harvested and distributed 32,000 pounds of fresh produce. And so they would harvest and then bring the things, the harvest to the church, put it on a scale, and then we'd tally up the data, which was lovely. I'll go back to this slide here because I do want to talk a little bit about the neighborhood where St. Mark's and St. John's is located. So where that smiley face is at the top, that's where the church is. It's at the very top corner of the Beechwood neighborhood. And often you'll hear Emma and Beechwood kind of like merged into one neighborhood. They are two distinct neighborhoods. There is an organization called Connected Communities, which kind of works to positively impact both the Emma and Beechwood neighborhoods. You may know where East High School is. It's very close to there. Just kind of thinking through some of the socioeconomic factors in this neighborhood. 77% of families in the neighborhood have a single female head of household, which in Monroe County is a leading indicator for households living below the poverty line. 42% of residents live below the poverty line in these two neighborhoods. 1 in 5 do not have access to a reliable vehicle, and 59% of households are housing cost burdened. And the reason I bring this up here is because I think the church that I was working at really focused on bringing neighbors into the church, doing their absolute best to do that. Many of the folks in the congregation did live outside of the neighborhood, maybe came from, I don't know, Brighton, drove into the city to go to this church. But while I was working there, I heard the team really prioritize wanting to involve the neighbors. We did a lot of like walking around the neighborhood, talking to folks about the gardens and about food share and about the farm stand, which I think was lovely. But I think really having a clear grasp on the socioeconomic context of the neighborhood was really important as we decided as an organization where to focus our efforts. And so when we think about farm stand, for example, that being an opportunity for neighbors in the area who maybe don't have that access to reliable transportation, who live kind of far from a grocery store and cannot access fresh, nutritious, locally grown food. I think that was helpful to have that context there. This data came from Connected Communities in that neighborhood. The gardens started really as just a place to grow food, but they really grew beyond that initial purpose as a place for education, as a place for job training and skill building for youth, and then for community gathering and recreation. There are compost bins at each of the gardens, which were built by the youth interns. I loved being a part of this project. Each year they've kind of been improved, which was wonderful. On the left there, that's Pastor Cindy. She was who I worked with, and she is a phenomenal, phenomenal person. I look up to her so much, and I'm really grateful for her leadership. In the center, there is a group of neighbors who would support the garden sometime. They live a couple houses down from one of the gardens, and they would bring their food scraps to the compost in that bucket and just contribute to that compost pile. And we would take the compost that was developed and add it to the garden bed. just some more photos from the gardens. This photo of me on the right, it is like I have this moment. I remember working for St. Mark's and St. John's where I was like, oh, this is changing my life. I am falling in love with growing food, like truly. I didn't really do that as a kid. My mom liked to garden, but she had like bushes and hostas and flowers, and that was wonderful. And I loved helping her with that, but I didn't always feel like super connected to that. And I had this moment, and it was literally under this bean teepee at this children's garden in Beechwood, where I was like, "This, I feel so connected to the food I'm going to eat later, and I'm so just like deeply grounded in a way that I hadn't really felt before." And to then be able to bring others into that. So in the center there, I brought friends that I went to college with and friends that I was serving in AmeriCorps with to the garden to help. And I think it was really nice to introduce them to something that was changing my life. And then to also just bring new and fresh energy to the space. I think that was a wonderful opportunity. And I think also we were still in the pandemic time. And so it was really just precious to connect, like to literally touch grass, like to connect with the land and with each other in a way that reminded us that like we all come from the same place in the earth kind of way. So I love that photo. It always reminds me of a very transformative time in my life. More photos, lots of joy in these gardens. Uh, the photo on the left is of a shed that is at the one of the gardens on, I believe it's Parcells Avenue. I could be wrong about where it actually is, but it's one of the gardens. And I bring it up here because that mural was painted by a friend of mine. Her name's Chloe Smith. She's an illustrator, an artist in the city of Rochester, and she was paid by a wall therapy grant to paint this mural on the gardens. There's some Swiss chard and sunflowers and bees, and it's beautiful. And the connection that I made with Chloe in tandem with this transformative experience I was having, learning to grow food and connect with people over food, literally like the trajectory of my life as a young person, as a person in this city, as a young professional, like it changed. And that's because I learned about 490 Farmers. 490 Farmers is an urban garden in the city of Rochester. It's on the corner of Meggs and Broadway. If you know where maybe Baber AME Church is, or if you know where Swillburger is, it's just around there. It is adjacent to the 490 Interstate, which is why it's called 490 Farmers. It was the first community garden on New York State-owned land. The New York State Department of Transportation owns and manages this piece of property. It was the first in the state to become a community garden. And Chloe Smith, who did this lovely mural, was the founder. And so the opportunity for me to meet her made it so that I could learn about 490 Farmers. The plots there are community rented plots. So you could rent a plot for the season and grow whatever it was that your heart desires. I was a plot member there for 4 years. I was a volunteer for 4 years and a board member for 3.5 or so, which was really special for me. I knew when I was in college and when I was learning about human services and about nonprofit organizations and about sharing our gifts with the world, that at some point I would do some nonprofit leadership. I had no idea it would be like my early 20s, but it ended up being really great for me. And I met so many amazing people and contributed to so much. 490 Farmers started as a grassroots crew in 2017 when Chloe Smith and some neighbors in the Pearl Megs Monroe neighborhood saw this plot of land and dreamed about what it could be. And at the same time, the Department of Transportation had been considering what if we did something with our land that contributed to community? And so it was this really momentous, synergistic period of time where someone had an idea and these people with land and power had a very similar idea. So the synergy happened, and they worked with the Southeast Area Coalition to develop the community garden in 2017. 3 years later, they got a 501(c)(3) status. And then in 2021, I started as a board member on the founding board. Across the street, where you see Meg Street, on the left side of that right photo, there was an expansion. And that was a really interesting scenario because on that plot of land there for over 20 years, maybe over 30 years, there were folks, there was unhoused encampment that lived on that land for a significant amount of time. And so they were core members of 490 Farmers, contributing to the sowing of the seeds and the tilling of the land and building of fences and building of a free food forest and a seed library and stewarding honeybee hives. And they were core members of the community, which I really appreciated. The opportunity to get to know folks that lived in my community and experience community in a new way. Just some more info about 490 Farmers. As plot members, there's a sliding scale payment. So, depending on how big your plot was and what felt feasible for you, you could offer whatever kind of money made sense. There's a shared tool shed, so no one had to go out and buy their own gloves and their own trowels and that kind of thing. A rainwater catchment system made it so that we could collect rain and then use it to water our beds in the free food forest. Compost and soil was offered at no cost to plot members. There was the opportunity to learn from others at a weekly volunteer night and weekly skill shares. And there was a lot of bartering going on. I loved that. I'd be like, hey, I don't need all of these carrots. Can I have a cabbage? We could really share, which I really loved. I kind of just went over all of those things, but I love these photos. It's a really special place for 90 Farmers. It's gone through lots of changes, lots of iterations. It's a great place for me to be a part of for a while. I'm going to talk about one more place that I've been involved in called Rochester Ecology Partners. It's a nonprofit here in Rochester. It serves the members of the greater Rochester community, helps people find nature where they live, work, and play, helps people learn about nature and connect with their community. Through nature-based education, that's with K to 12 students as well as with college students. There's community cultivation events and programs, and then there's a focus on environmental health research. And so I worked at Rochester Ecology Partners in a couple different capacities. I started as a researcher. We were studying or looking into environmental organizations in the greater Rochester region. And so looking at what kind of priorities they had, what kind of resources and resource gaps were available, what they needed to really contribute to a healthier environment, a healthier community, and how partnerships could be built to further that mission as a region. After doing that work, I joined the team as the community cultivation coordinator. So I focused on hosting events for people to connect with nature. We had a nature-based learning symposium where educators from all around the region can come together. We had like an outdoor conference basically in Duran Eastman Park. We talked about strategies to connect students in our classrooms with the world around them, and how to make that possible and how to continue that, because we know the impact of nature on kids is incredible, and we know that kids are not experiencing nature in the way that they should be. They're not doing it enough. They're not doing it intentionally enough. And there's a way that we can change that. In the top there, this was such a good day. I was invited to come to a fourth grade class at Genesee Community Charter School, and we talked about your right to nature. And we talked about your inherent right, your inherent rights. What are your inherent rights? Is the right to nature something that we all have? And it was so fun to talk about that with kids. And they all were like, let's go outside right now. And so in fact, we did. And we finished our presentation outside, which was wonderful. We talked about the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights, which is something the city of Rochester adopted several years ago. There are 12 outdoor rights that are on there. It's things like learn to swim, go fishing, things like that. And the city of Rochester is working to incorporate more of those experiences for kids through their Department of Rec and Human Services, through summer camps, through classes in school. The bottom right, I'm very excited to share about. I stopped working at this organization a little over a year ago, and since then, they've started this program called Growing Good. And some of you may have been here last week. I know that you had FoodLink come in, and I love the work of FoodLink. And if you ever have the opportunity to go to their farm, you should, because it is so beautiful, and their Edible Education Center is just a dream. And the bottom right photo is a news story in WXXI of a camp that Rochester Ecology Partners and FoodLink are co-hosting for the second year this summer. It's called Growing Good, and they focus on nature-based experiences on the farm. And they talk about where our food comes from and how being connected to our food and being connected with each other makes us healthier and makes us stronger and smarter. And it is just phenomenal. And there are volunteer opportunities with that program if you're interested in learning more. I kind of hinted at this a moment ago, but Rochester Ecology Partners really is working to kind of solve that nature deficit problem, where we know that kids and people in general are not spending as much time outside as we used to. And that is not good for us. We're spending too much time on screens, too much time inside. That's contributing to lower physical activity, mental health problems, problems in school, problems with attention, all of these things, right? And so Rochester Ecology Partners focuses on reducing that nature deficit and helping make sure that kids have that access, especially during their school day, because it's impacting their academics in a positive way and it's impacting their health in a positive way. And so on the left, this is a project I worked on when I was working at Rochester Ecology Partners. And we did one infographic about health outcomes and another infographic, which I didn't include here, but about academic outcomes of nature-based learning. I read this book once by Richard Louv that I wanted to share a quote from here. It's called Last Child in the Woods, and it's about nature and how our children need more of it and aren't getting enough of it. And it says, passion is lifted from the earth itself by the muddy hands of the young. It travels along grass-stained sleeves to the heart. If we are going to save environmentalism and the environment, we must also save an endangered indicator species, the child in nature. Good book. Totally recommend. Just some photos. I love the work of Rochester Ecology Partners, and it feels like a culmination of the things I learned in school at St. John Fisher and the work that I've done ever since. Really just seeing that we as people can come together and contribute to something greater. I had students, fourth graders and even younger, come to me and talk to me when I was teaching them about climate change, wanting to know if we're going to be okay. They're thinking about this, right? They hear about the impact of climate change and they want to know how they can contribute to that. And when I hear that, it gives me hope. It scares me a little bit, but it gives me hope, a lot more hope than it does fear. And those moments are why I do what I do. I mean, there's many reasons, right? I love seeing people connect to nature. I love going outside and sharing a new type of flower with someone who may not know and help people notice the birds and the trees and the worms in the ground, especially kids, but also adults. And I know that it makes us healthier and happier and more hopeful to connect to nature and to each other. I'm almost done. I have just a couple more slides. I haven't talked much about what I'm currently doing, and I won't go too much into it, but I currently work at RIT, and there's a couple of things that I want to share. I manage a program called Goodbye Goodbye, which is coming up, and I'm so excited about. We collect items that students in the dorms and apartments on campus no longer want, usable items, items that next year's students will just buy again at Target or at Walmart or wherever they're going to go. Things like home goods and clothing and furniture. 11 years ago, students at RIT saw that lots of items, tons of items were going to the landfill. And so they started this program. This is a student-run program that staff oversee. And we collect items over a series of 12 days. and we sort them and then we store them and then we resell them in the fall. And that's coming up starting on April 30th. And I'm so looking forward to it. It's very rewarding. And we're looking for help if anyone is interested in helping. I'm happy to share more information, but we always need hands. I also have the fortunate opportunity of spending time with climate and sustainability leaders on campus. And so at the top right, that's actually at the FoodLink farm at the Edible Education Center. That's Frank, who works for FoodLink, sharing more about their work in the neighborhood and with FoodLink and distributing food across the community. So I really have the opportunity to bring young people, students into the community and talk about sustainability and about the environment. And it is just a blessing, truly. If you'd like to learn more about things I'm sharing or you want to contribute in ways, there is a citywide plan called Rock 2034, which talks a lot about urban agriculture and about the urban forest. And there are lots of sections in there, but I particularly like the one on urban agriculture. ACT Rochester is an organization that hosts regional data around health, and there is a Food and Health Connection page. You can volunteer with different organizations, share your time, your gifts, your talent with SMSJ, the church I worked at, 490 Farmers, Flower City Noir Collective, FoodLink Community Farm, Rochester Ecology Partners. There are many ways to get involved. Rochester Youth Year is the opportunity that I had to be in AmeriCorps. If you know any young people graduating from college soon, that's a great opportunity for them. I'm done sharing now. Thank you. I am looking forward to your questions. What questions can I answer?
For the community gardens, I had a plot once,
Yeah.
but getting water, I mean, we don't have to worry
Oh,
about the rain that we've had now,
yeah.
but getting water there was, does the city ever bring that truck around that water stuff?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Where was your garden?
It was in Brockport.
Okay, cool. I've seen a couple of different ways that community gardens have done this. At 490 Farmers, we invested, so we had the rainwater catchment system, which was built by volunteers that collected water. There was a spigot, and there were four, I don't know if they're called cisterns or exactly what they are, but they're massive, like 70-gallon tanks that had spigots on it. So we collected rainwater and did that. But that is reliant on rain, right? And so then after a few years, we made a pretty significant investment. It was $6,000. And for a small organization, that was a significant investment. And I think we took out a loan for it. And that was to put a spigot in the ground and connect to the groundwater. And it had like a pump, and then we connected a hose to it. And we also, as an organization, had a relationship with the fire department, the station nearby. Whenever we were having a dry summer, we would call the fire department, say, "Hey, we need some water," and the fire department would very gracefully come over and they would fill our tanks for us, which was really sweet. That was a really nice relationship we had. And then what else have I seen? At the community garden at RIT, which is a little bit different, we have significant resources as a school. But we have an automatic drip irrigation system that's connected to the groundwater where we have it on a timer, and it drips through the irrigation pipes. Yeah, I think those are the main things I've seen. But water is a challenge, right? Like, and you have to have it for your gardens, especially during those really hot summers. And our summers are getting hotter with less consistent rain. So it's a challenge for sure. What did you guys have there in Brockport?
Water,
Yeah,
in.
yeah. That's tough. Yeah,
I'm curious about all the sites.
yeah.
Obviously, the one that you were, the 490 was the Department of Transportation property, right? But then all these other gardens, the one that relates to where you served as a AmeriCorps
Yeah.
volunteer, but that's a church. Now, do those properties, were they private properties? How were those identified, and are they part owned by the organization?
That's a great
Or
question.
how does it work?
Yeah. So for 490 Farmers, 490 Farmers was Department of Transportation land. So there was kind of a lease agreement in place. So they owned the property and we were leasing it essentially. And then for St. Mark's and St. John's, I'll go back to that map. All of these sites were on city parcels that were vacant. And so owned by the city with initially they were 1 year permits where the church would sign a permit with the city and say, this is what we're doing with the property. It's what most city community gardens do is they use city-owned property. There is a way to see all of the vacant lots in the city on the City of Rochester's website. There's a GIS map that can show you where the vacant parcels are. And so then it's working with the city. There is a coordinator of community gardens. I believe her name is Daisy. And she works with people to I know, right? That is such a great name. They work with folks to make that permit happen. I will say a 1 year permit is a challenge. It's like you got to re-sign it every year, and if you don't get it, or if someone comes in and develops, then all of the work you've done is gone. Thank you for being here
Yeah.
today. And so through some advocacy, thank you so much. Through some advocacy through St. Mark's and St. John's and some other organizations, they eventually started doing 5 year permits. So now community gardens can apply for a 5 year permit.
And did the church apply to be a sponsor of AmeriCorps
Yep.
people? How many others were besides you?
In my cohort, there were 18 at the time. I think the program is a little bit smaller based on federal funding being squashed a little. But at the time, there were 18 of us. I think this year the program has maybe 9 or so. And so organizations in Rochester would apply to be a part of the program, and there was a cost share. So the federal government would spend, I don't know, $5,000, and then the organization would cost share $5,000, and that would pay for our living stipend.
And AmeriCorps paid these 18 people. How much annually do you get when you're in AmeriCorps? I mean, is it enough to live on?
It was horrible. It was horrible. And and that's an excellent question. And it was challenging. It definitely was challenging. When you do the math, they consider it a living stipend, so they're technically not paying you hourly. But if you do the math, it ends up being like $5 an hour.
Yeah.
Which wasn't great. I think they have raised it a little bit, but the cost of living only keeps going up, right? So it was really challenging, but I think some of the ethos around that was that the population that you're serving in any of the organizations are typically folks living in poverty. And so without saying, we want you to live in poverty so that you understand the folks that you're serving, that's essentially what they were saying. Like, it's not what they were saying with their words, but the ethos was there, right?
Did the
So-
church help you find places to live?
The church would have helped me because Cindy, the pastor, was amazing and offered me so much support. Thankfully, my living situation was fine. I had been living somewhere that I could afford already, and so I continued living there. And I had lots of roommates, and a second job. Yeah,
Wow.
it's challenging, but it was worth it for me.
So, Aaron, soil testing
Yeah.
of neighborhoods
Yeah.
with all of these organizations. I mean, we have former clothing factories in Rochester,
Mhm.
so can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Pat. And you're so right. I mean, so much of the soil in Rochester is contaminated by industry and by dumping many, many years ago. And most of the community gardens, at least that I'm aware of, and the ones that I've been a part of, typically will do raised beds. So they're not directly in like the native soil that's there. And a lot of times, I haven't seen a ton of soil testing happening before a community garden starts. They typically will just add several inches, layers of soil to amend, and then to make sure that the roots aren't in the contaminated soil. Cornell Cooperative Extension of Monroe County does offer soil testing for community gardens, which I think is a wonderful resource. But typically what I see, or what I have seen, is amendments made over time by adding just layers of soil so that you're not growing directly in contaminated soil. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for us of how we could be better community members with nature and people? Very vague, very open.
That's a good question, Carly. Um, yeah, I think taking the time to appreciate the world around us, I think being intentional about that, right? Like, sometimes if I'm really busy, I don't step outside except to like walk to my car to get to work. And I'm really frazzled, got a lot going on. And then I'm like, I really just need to take a breath of fresh air. And I need to notice the leaves on the trees and the birds in the sky. And I feel my body settle. And then I realize that I am part of something so much bigger, right? Like I am part of those trees and the birds and the bugs and all of those things. And I think that those moments of intentionality help me to know that I need to continue caring for the earth in some way. I think there's lots of ways that that can tangibly look for us. And I think really just like encourage you and all of the people around us to find whatever ways work for us to deepen your sense of community and your sense of relation to nature. And for me, that's like talking to people about nature and going on walks and showing people that there's a way to be connected, and volunteering my time with organizations that grow food, for example. But that could look like, I don't know. What else could it look like? It could look like becoming a beekeeper and growing native pollinator plants to support our pollinators and learning why that's beneficial to all of the beings around us. Could look like, I don't know, all kinds of things. Does that answer your question? You're welcome. Did I go?
Several here.
Yeah.
About your Goodbye
Yeah.
program. I have offspring that have taught in higher education, and each spring, as the dorms clear out, all kinds of great stuff being just
So
put
much.
into dumpsters. Where do you keep all this stuff before the people arrive in the fall?
That's an excellent question. And RIT, once again, so many resources. We are very fortunate to have a massive, we have lots of property. And there is a place on campus. It's a kind of off the beaten path. You wouldn't really see it if you were just driving around campus. It's called the Boneyard, which is really scary. When I first started, they were like, "We're going to take you to the Boneyard today." And I was like, "What is that?" And it is just a place on campus where facilities keeps their plows and their salt trucks. And there are these big storage trailers. So the program has 4 like storage units, one 48-foot storage trailer, and then over the summer we rent 4 48-foot storage trailers, and stuff that students donate fill all of these storage units and trailers. It takes up such a large footprint. And so we have, thankfully, at RIT the space to do that and the financial resources to do it, to rent those trailers. So we have a massive operation where we have student leaders and hundreds of volunteers come in and sort items, and then we box them up, we label them, and then we put them in storage until the fall when we resell them.
And so it's sponsored by the university?
Yep. And everything we sell in the fall back to students just goes right back to the program.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I'm curious about this effort by RIT.
Yeah.
So you work for RIT.
I do.
Program specialist.
Yes.
Is that under the sustainability department?
It is.
There.
Yeah. So
We have a woman who's a member of our church who's on the faculty of the sustainability.
how cool. What's her name?
department.
Oh, Callie comes here.
Yes.
Oh, how cool. How cool. I saw she spoke last month at your forum. That's wonderful. So I work for campus sustainability, which is like the operations of the university rather than the academic department of sustainability. So Callie and I don't really interact a lot other than we serve the same students. So under the office of the president at RIT, I think 2 presidents ago, Dr. Munson started the Office of Sustainability. And so it's a very small team. There's 3 of us, and we support the university in making decisions about energy efficiency, about building use and materials. And we do things like support the nature trails on campus and the community garden and the honeybees. And we help students get involved in those things. We don't teach, though. Like, I'm not a faculty member, I'm a staff person.
But the RIT has a community garden?
We do, and it's awesome.
Campus?
Yeah, it's really, really cool. We have, I don't know, maybe 30 plots, and some of the faculty use it for research. So right now there's a number of different research projects happening there. There's one photography professor who brings her class out every single week, and they use the garden as their subject matter. And there's another photo class that's using the plants to create ink, which I just think is amazing. There's lots of really cool research happening there, and classes will come out and do teaching. It's awesome.
I'm wondering if in your gardening programs, do any of them for, say, high school age students include farm to table and that cooking? And I'm just wondering what those are.
Yeah. That's a great question. So, I haven't done a ton of farm to table personally. I will say that when I was at St. Mark's and St. John's Episcopal Church, we did a salsa canning workshop with our high school students that were working there over the summer, which was so much fun. There is a commercial kitchen in that church, which I think is a wonderful asset. And they want to be doing more of that kind of farm to table or like cooking and prep skills with young people as they enter on and they continue in their life. The only opportunity I've had to do something like that was the salsa canning workshop. And so we harvested tomatoes and peppers and cilantro from the gardens that the young people were stewarding. And so they had that opportunity of sowing the seeds and taking care of the plants and then harvesting and making something with it and then enjoying it, which was great.
That's great.
Yeah.
Could you give me the name of the person
Absolutely.
to contact?
I would
Thank
happily.
you.
Of course.
Aaron, I thought of another organization you can add when you're out in the community and people ask about volunteer opportunities. Girl Scouts.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all kind of a little old to be co-leaders, but I was one for a long time, and I remember taking kids from the city out to their camp, and the kids would walk around and say, "It's so dark out here." I mean, their experience of nature.
Yeah.
It was a first time. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That reminds me, Pat, that I was talking earlier about the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights. And one of the 12 rights on that was see a starry night sky. And I have had the chance to take students camping for the first time. And there were students who very infrequently left the city of Rochester and didn't really spend a lot of, especially nighttime, outside of a place with lots of light pollution, and so got to experience like a starry sky for the first time, and just the bright eyes that I got to witness. It's like that moment where I hope someday they think back on it and it's like, oh my gosh, that I remember thinking I was I was part of something so much bigger. It was really cool. I don't know much about Girl Scouts, but they actually host an AmeriCorps Vista as St. Mark's and St. John's did, which is cool. Yes.
Could you speak a little to the beehives, and if they're
Yes.
strategically placed, and what the
Yes.
inspection entails,
Oh,
please?
I could talk about beehives and bees and honey for hours. I became a beekeeper last year, so this was my first full year beekeeping. And currently I'm in relationship with 3 honeybee hives, and they're all at RIT. So I'm the campus beekeeper, which was a job that was just kind of placed in my lap and has, just as growing food did, has significantly changed my life. They are not significantly placed, strategically placed is what you asked. They are strategically placed. Honeybees need proximity to some water. They need to be kind of out of, like, not walking distance, but like not on like a main path, not anywhere that someone's gonna like knock into them. You want to have some sort of like wind barrier so they don't get knocked over if there's a strong wind. And ideally, I forget the actual cardinal directions, but there is some sort of thinking you should do around where the sun sets and, the placement of the sun at a particular time of day, because you want them to have the most amount of sun at the time they're going out to forage. A hive inspection is one of my favorite parts of beekeeping. It's something you do throughout most of the year, just not in the winter. In the winter, you kind of need to leave them alone because it's cold and they're in there thermoregulating, flapping their wings, keeping each other warm. But throughout the rest of the year, I go into a hive about once every week or week and a half and check in on their resources, check in to make sure that the queen is active, that she's laying eggs, that she doesn't appear to be sick, make sure that there aren't signs of pest or disease, kind of get a good eye on the level of space and resources they have, because honeybees, this is a crazy fact, queen bees lay 1,500 eggs a day. That's so many eggs, 1,500 eggs a day. In each little hexagon cell, there is one egg. So if she's laying 1,500 eggs a day, she needs so much space, right? And so you have to make sure that she has significant space, because if they fill all of the cells with eggs and larvae and also food and they run out of space, they might swarm, which means half the colony is going to leave and try and create another home. Some beekeepers want that, some don't. That's a little bit of a debate. But you also need to make sure they don't have too much space, because that can invite pests. There's a lot when it comes to hive inspections and caring for honeybees, and it is just a world that I'm so thrilled to have become a part of. I had this moment last summer where I was having a challenging time beekeeping. It's a lot to learn, and I'm doing it as part of my job, and so I feel like the stakes are high because students are looking to me, trying to gain knowledge and experience. And I'm also using university resources to do this thing. So it feels like the weight is on my back and it's really heavy. And I was like, oh my God, this is so hard. And I learned that honeybees recognize human faces after some time. I don't know how much time. I need to learn that. But they do. They recognize human faces. And when I learned that, I had this click where I was by the hives and I was like, these girls know me. And I hope that they know me as someone who is compassionate and who is caring for them in a way that is very reciprocal, because I'm learning from them and they're benefiting from my care. And since then, I was like, yes, this is hard. This is hard work. But these honeybees depend on me to care for them responsibly and compassionately and reciprocally, because we as humans depend on them to pollinate the plants that we use and we eat. And all of the species around us also use and eat. And so that reciprocal relationship, that cycle of caring for them because they care for us, like the moment I realized they knew who I was like, huh, yeah. Great. Thank you for asking me about bees.
Aaron, that's not a trivial point, because in China, where they have such severe pollution problems, they're having to hand pollinate. Yeah, because it's that bad. So, this is part of our global commitment to, maintaining clean air.
Yeah.
And, how can we accomplish that globally?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, Pat. And I think, those moments where you realize that the things we do right in front of us in our communities have an impact on people around the world and the land around the world. Those moments, especially when I can offer that level of realization for young people, that is like what continues to fill my cup. It's good to be reminded myself too that the choices that I make impact all of the things around us. It's not just about me. It's not just about, the 20 of you that are sitting in front of me. It's about everyone that will come after us and every being that will, be blossomed in the next several generations. It's a good reminder.
Did I see a little library in one of the pictures?
Yes, you
as well?
did. Where was that? I know it's in here. There are several at the gardens that St. Mark's and St. John's runs. I guess I could look here. Yes, little free library. I think there's one at each of the 7 gardens they have. And I love the little libraries. Right now at RIT, we're considering doing a little seed library. And one of my students is also working on a little art swap library, which I think is just very fun. He's an art student and really wants to make it so that other art students can benefit from all of the art supplies.
I think there was a slide that I'm wondering if you could share with us,
Sure.
maybe on eConnect or something, that had a list of volunteer opportunities.
Yeah, I would be happy to.
I wasn't writing fast enough.
I'm happy
I don't
to.
know if we can do that or.
Yeah, I did share my slides with you this morning.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
happy to, if that doesn't work, just let me know and I'll maybe share this in an email
Okay.
or as a PDF or however works. Just let me know. Yep, feel free. Absolutely.
Okay. And then I have one other question. I think it was was it the soup volunteers who built the compost?
Yeah.
Do they do that every summer?
Yeah, at St. Mark's and St. John's.
Mhm.
Yes. They host soup interns. I think they're still doing it to this day.
And do they ever do it for private public
a
for
really good
private
question.
individuals?
I'm curious why you're asking because I may have a good resource for you.
You should see our compost pile.
Yeah.
It's like 2 piles.
Yeah.
It's not contained and fenced like it should be. And
So
I keep saying,
actually,
we need to do something about this.
I have a different resource for you.
Okay.
So this organization is called Taproot Collective, and they're based in the city of Rochester, and they also host soup interns. And so soup is a program across the city of Rochester where they place youth and they pay the youth to work over the summer. And a lot of them happen to be garden-based jobs because it's the summer and Taproot hosts a lot. And
Okay.
Taproot, their role in the community is to support other community gardens. And so they work with organizations and groups to do projects like building compost gardens or rebuilding garden beds,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
That's great to know.
Yes.
Okay.
And every year they do all kinds of different projects with their youth. You're welcome. You guys got great questions. Yeah, my pleasure.
So thank you. That was fabulous information. Thank you very much, really. Volumes of information. And just a quick announcement for next week, we will have Eric Kunzman, who's an RIT professor. He's a photography professor. He'll be talking about the Good Phone Project, which is basically recycling old payphones into he'll explain this into like an Ethernet free access to phones for folks who may need communications and don't have a cell phone of their own, that sort of thing. Those good phones are planted in various places, including teen empowerment, which we support here as a church, but Cameron Communities, Father Tracy's Advocacy Center, he'll go through all these various places that they have these phones available to anyone who needs communications and access to a phone, or where someone needs to call them back for a job interview. They can set up their own voicemails and such. So it sounds really interesting. He was on the WXXI Connections, and we thought that would be interesting for us to have. So hopefully we'll see you here next week. And again, thank you, Erin.
My pleasure. Thank you. I feel like I recognize you. What's your name?